It was supposed to be a normal afternoon at the luxury mall. Shoppers bustled between designer stores, salespeople flashed polished smiles, and the soft hum of expensive perfume filled the air. In the middle of it all stood Emma, a quiet, humble woman dressed in simple clothes, holding a small shopping bag and waiting near the fountain. She didn't fit in with the high-end surroundings. Her plain outfit, worn sneakers, and gentle demeanor caught the attention of a group of women seated nearby at a cafe terrace. Dressed head to toe in designer labels, their laughter suddenly grew louder, pointed, and mean-spirited. They didn't know her name. They didn't know anything about her. But to them, she was easy to mock, a nobody in their world of luxury handbags and exclusive clubs. One of them even whispered just loud enough, "She must be lost, or window shopping for dreams she can't afford." The others giggled, sipping from champagne glasses, clearly amused by the presence of someone they thought didn't belong. Emma stood quietly, her eyes calm but heavy with the weight of years spent being judged for her simplicity. She said nothing, just clutched her bag a little tighter and glanced down at her phone. She wasn't embarrassed, just used to being underestimated. What they didn't know was that Emma wasn't alone. And she wasn't waiting for a taxi or a friend. She was waiting for someone they could never imagine. Suddenly, the air changed. The deep rumble of an engine echoed through the marble-lined parking circle, turning heads. A gleaming black Rolls Royce slowly pulled up to the entrance, its silver grille shining under the afternoon sun. The chauffeur stepped out swiftly and opened the door. Everyone's gaze followed the luxury car with curiosity, including the women at the cafe, whose laughter faded to silence. Then, as if time slowed, Emma walked forward. She wasn't going to explain herself. She didn't need to. But the next few seconds would change everything, their expressions, their assumptions, and the story they thought they were in. Because the man stepping out of that Rolls Royce wasn't just any man. And he wasn't just rich. He was Emma's husband. And he had heard the laughter. The moment Emma's husband stepped out of the car, the atmosphere shifted. He was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored suit, and walked with the quiet confidence of someone used to owning every room he entered. His eyes, calm but sharp, scanned the area, and stopped on Emma. And then, for just a split second, they shifted to the group of women who had been laughing earlier. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The rich women froze in place. Their laughter was long gone now, replaced by awkward glances and nervous sips of their now warm champagne. Some of them tried to act casual, flipping their sunglasses back on or pretending to check their phones, but it was too late. They knew they had judged someone far too soon. But what they still didn't know was who Emma really was. Emma smiled softly as her husband approached, and he took her hand like she was the most precious thing in the world. There was no show, no flashy gesture, just quiet respect, and something deeper that those women at the cafe had never seen in their lives. Real love. Real power. The kind that doesn't need to shout. But how did a woman like Emma end up with a man like that? That's where the story really begins. Emma hadn't always lived in quiet wealth. She grew up in a small town, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Life had been simple, sometimes hard, but it shaped her into someone who saw through appearances and valued honesty over image. She didn't care about labels, didn't chase trends. That's what made her stand out to him. Her husband, Daniel, had come from money. But unlike others in his world, he had grown tired of shallow conversations and empty connections. He met Emma at a bookstore cafe, of all places. She had been reading the same book he loved as a kid, and something about her presence, so quiet, so grounded, stayed with him. From that moment on, everything changed. Still, Emma never flaunted their life together. She preferred mornings in the garden over high-end parties. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. That's why she hadn't reacted earlier, even when the women laughed. But Daniel had heard it all from the car. And he wasn't about to let it go. Daniel didn't cause a scene. He simply nodded at Emma and whispered something only she could hear. But even without raising his voice, his presence had already stirred something. The women at the cafe tried to act like nothing had happened, but the discomfort was written all over their faces. One of them, Vanessa, glanced at her friend with wide eyes. She recognized Daniel. Not just as any rich man, but as the billionaire CEO of a tech company they all talked about at charity galas. The same man who rarely appeared in public and almost never with a woman by his side. And now here he was, holding hands with the woman they had just mocked. What they didn't know was that Vanessa had met Daniel once, briefly, at a private investor dinner months ago. Back then, she had tried to flirt with him, not knowing he was married. He had politely declined and disappeared from the event early. Now, putting the pieces together, she felt her stomach drop. Meanwhile, Emma noticed the shift in their body language but stayed quiet. She wasn't the kind of person to hold grudges. But deep down, something stung. Not because of the insults, she had grown used to those over the years, but because people still thought that kindness came from weakness, and that simplicity meant someone had no worth. She had worked hard to keep her values intact, even after marrying into wealth. That wasn't easy in Daniel's world. The tension didn't end there. Back at home, Emma and Daniel had been dealing with pressure of a different kind. His board of directors didn't fully approve of her. Not because of anything she did, but because she didn't fit the image. She didn't come from a known family, didn't attend elite events, and preferred community outreach over social climbing. Some board members whispered that she might be a distraction. Others feared that her modest lifestyle made Daniel seem too distant from the high-profile image they wanted him to keep. And now, this moment at the mall, this public humiliation, might stir those conversations again. Daniel's security team had already noticed someone taking pictures from across the courtyard. If the photos leaked, tabloids could twist the story. Billionaire's wife mocked in public could be tomorrow's headline. But for Daniel, this wasn't just about a reputation. It was about standing up for the woman he chose. And he wasn't going to stay silent for long. As Daniel gently guided Emma into the Rolls Royce, the flash of a phone camera caught the corner of his eye. He didn't react, but inside, he knew what that meant. Somewhere, someone had already begun crafting a story they didn't understand. This wasn't just a small social incident, it could easily turn into a media frenzy. Being a billionaire came with power, but it also came with eyes everywhere. And now, the wrong kind of attention was brewing. Inside the car, Emma stayed quiet for a moment. The engine purred softly as they pulled away from the mall, the tinted windows shutting out the stairs behind them. Daniel reached for her hand, giving it a light squeeze, but she was somewhere else in her thoughts. This wasn't the first time she'd been judged for how she looked, how she dressed, or what people assumed about her. But something about today stuck more than usual. Maybe it was the way the laughter had felt so pointed. Maybe it was because she knew the world her husband lived in still didn't fully accept her. Meanwhile, across the city, in the sleek office of one of Daniel's business rivals, a different conversation was happening. A man named Colton, a sharp and ambitious investor with a long-time grudge against Daniel, had just received the photo taken at the mall. The message that came with it was short: "Thought you'd want to see this. Might make waves soon." Colton leaned back in his chair, a smirk forming on his lips. He'd always thought Daniel's choice of wife was a weakness, something he could eventually use. And now, it seemed like the perfect opening to stir public opinion, question Daniel's focus, and possibly rattle the company's leadership. Back at Daniel and Emma's home, the staff had already heard whispers from other employees who followed social media closely. Their head of communications, Mira, called Daniel's assistant in a low voice, saying, "We need to get ahead of this before it spins out. We don't need another viral moment turning into a distraction." She was loyal, but she knew how quickly perception could shift. One poorly framed photo, one ugly headline, and suddenly Emma would be blamed for drama she didn't create. Daniel and Emma sat in silence as the city passed by their window. Neither of them spoke the words out loud, but they both knew it: this moment wasn't over. It was just beginning. The car ride home was quiet, but tension hung thick in the air. Daniel kept his hand on Emma's, his grip steady, reassuring. But his mind was racing. he knew how fast things moved in his world. A photo, a rumor, a few assumptions, that's all it took to create a storm. And right now, someone was stirring one up. His phone buzzed with messages from his assistant, his PR team, even a couple of board members already checking in. He didn't even need to open them to know what they were about. Emma finally spoke, her voice soft. "Do you think they'll make a big deal out of it?" Daniel turned to her, his expression serious but calm. "They already are." She looked down, quiet again. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to be the reason Daniel had to fight a new battle. This wasn't her world. She'd never asked for the spotlight. But now, it was coming for her whether she wanted it or not. Meanwhile, across town, Colton was already making calls. He saw this as his opportunity. If he could get the media to frame Emma as a problem, someone unfit to be beside a billionaire CEO, he might be able to shake confidence in Daniel's leadership. He was smart enough not to attack her directly. Instead, he used words like brand image, public narrative, and investor perception. And those words were powerful in the corporate world. He had allies who were more than willing to fan the flames. At the same time, the photo from the mall had already gone viral. It was posted with a snide caption, "When you're shopping like a billionaire but look like you just got off the bus." Comments poured in. Some mocked Emma's simple outfit. Others jumped to defend her. But either way, the internet was watching now. Inside the car, Daniel's phone lit up again, this time from Mira, his head of communications. She was blunt, "You need to say something. Before someone else does." Daniel looked at Emma, her eyes tired but strong. He knew he could release a statement. Hire someone to spin the story. But he didn't want spin. He wanted truth. And for the first time, he realized this wasn't just about reputation anymore. This was about respect. About protecting what mattered most. And that meant facing everything head-on. Even if it meant war. Just as Daniel was about to respond to Myra's message, another notification came through, this one from an unknown number. It wasn't a text. It was a video. He tapped it cautiously, and within seconds, his expression changed. Emma noticed it right away. His jaw tightened, and the calm in his eyes vanished. "What is it?" she asked, leaning in. He didn't answer at first, just handed her the phone. The video was short. Less than a minute. It showed the moment Emma had been laughed at by the women at the mall, but from a different angle. This time, there was audio. Clear as day. The cruel comments, the mocking laughter, the insult about her clothes, it was all caught, and worse, the camera panned directly to Emma's face as she stood quietly, holding back emotion. It was raw. Honest. And completely unfiltered. But the twist? The video wasn't leaked to embarrass Emma. It was being posted online, by someone defending her. A stranger. The caption read, "A kind woman mocked for not dressing rich enough. But wait till you see who she really is." It already had hundreds of thousands of views, and the comments were flooding in. People were angry. Not at Emma, but at the cruelty. At the arrogance of those women. And just like that, public opinion started turning. Daniel's phone began buzzing nonstop. News outlets wanted comments. Social media influencers were resharing the video. And while some tried to dig into Emma's past, what they found only fueled the fire, stories of her charity work, her volunteering, her efforts to help local communities without ever seeking attention. But this sudden spotlight came with risk. Colton, now watching the video trend across platforms, realized his plan was backfiring. He hadn't expected the public to rally behind Emma. In fact, it was making Daniel and Emma look more genuine than ever. So he changed tactics. Quietly, he reached out to an online tabloid with a different angle, a rumor. One that claimed Emma had hidden parts of her past. That she had once applied to work at Daniel's company years before they met and had been rejected. It was a lie. But lies, when whispered into the right ears, had power. And now, with the world watching, the truth didn't matter as much as the story people chose to believe. Emma's name was trending. But not everyone had good intentions. The pressure was boiling. Within hours, the video of Emma had crossed 1 million views. News anchors were discussing it, hashtags were trending, and public sympathy surged in her favor. But just as the support grew louder, Colton's planted rumor began to spread. A headline hit a popular gossip site, was Billionaire's wife rejected by his company before they met? It was exactly the kind of twist that stirred doubt. People started asking questions. Was Emma just playing the long game? Was it all an act? Emma sat across from Daniel in their living room, scrolling through the mixed storm of support and suspicion. She was calm, but Daniel wasn't. "This has gone too far," he said. "We need to speak. Not just a press release. I'm doing an interview. With you." She looked up, unsure. She had never craved attention. But this wasn't about her anymore. It was about setting things straight. The next day, they appeared live on a respected news network. Daniel spoke first, defending Emma with clarity and strength. He addressed the video, the rumors, and the pressure they'd both faced. Then he turned to her, letting her speak. Emma didn't talk like a media-trained personality. She spoke from the heart. About growing up with little. About believing in kindness, and how being simple didn't mean being small. She confirmed that, yes, she once applied to a job at Daniel's company, but never got a response, and had never even known he existed at the time. The audience believed her. The tension shifted. Comment sections flooded with praise. Colton's rumor fell flat. And just when the story seemed to be settling into a feel-good ending, the final twist hit. After the interview, Emma received a handwritten letter at the house. No signature. No return address. Just a simple note, "There's more to your husband's company history than you know. Check the hiring records from 8 years ago. Someone made sure your application was blocked." Emma stared at the letter, frozen. She hadn't thought much of that job rejection, it was one of many. But now, with everything that had happened, the note sent a chill down her spine. She turned to Daniel, who was on the phone with his legal team, unaware. The world finally saw her. But someone still didn't want her there. Emma held the letter for a long time before finally handing it to Daniel. He read it twice, his expression darkening with each word. "I want to know who did this," he said, his voice low but steady. They both knew the company was large, with layers of staff and history. But Daniel had built it from the ground up. He didn't like the idea of someone within his circle working against Emma, even years before he met her. A quiet investigation began behind the scenes. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. 8 years ago, a senior hiring manager, now long gone, had quietly flagged Emma's application as not a culture fit. There was no real reason. No performance issue. Just a personal bias. The discovery hit Daniel hard. Not just because of what was done to Emma, but because that same culture had silently followed her into their life. Into boardroom whispers. Into mall-side gossip. Into assumptions from people who thought she didn't belong. Daniel made changes. He ordered a full review of internal practices. Quietly removed lingering staff who had shown the same mindset. And when the opportunity came to speak at an industry summit weeks later, he took it. But instead of promoting new technology or quarterly wins, he shared Emma's story. Not just the public side, but the hidden pieces, the application rejection, the way judgment still shapes powerful spaces, and how people with the purest intentions often get pushed aside for not looking the part. Emma stood beside him at that event. Not as someone needing defense, but as someone finally seen. The women from the mall never reached out, never apologized, though one of them later posted a vague quote about learning from mistakes. It didn't matter. Emma had nothing to prove to them. Colton backed off after the failed smear, his attempt to rattle Daniel having the opposite effect. Investors were now more confident in Daniel than ever. Not just because he protected his brand, but because he stood by the woman who stood by him. In the end, Emma didn't change her clothes. Or her walk. Or her ways. She didn't need to. Because sometimes, being simple in a loud world is the boldest statement of all. And real worth? It never needs a label.